Hello, welcome to today's video. It's been a while since I've done one, but like the best content, it's taking somebody else's. But hopefully this one's a bit more high effort. And so this is Zvi Mauschwitz. He's my go-to AI commentator for the most part. I disagree with some of his US AI maximalism instead of a more multilateral, flatter playing field, but he writes good stuff every day, and at the very least, he is open. And he has interesting opinions, and he takes the occasional detour into stuff like this. And this is actually a wonderful, like, five-part series at this point. Um, but today, we're only going to look at one part because this is a drip feed content. I mean, hopefully the audio is clear or reasonable enough. But again, I'll link to this, but I just find it to be just the structure of how he offers his writing to be very easy to follow. I've read this before. I just find it amusing for some of the takeaways, and certainly it's an interesting way to diagnose certain observations that probably a lot of people instinctually have a sense for, but haven't actually thought about. I'm just gonna scroll down, so naturally we'll see what catches the eye. Course of studies, and he does touch on it throughout, is that there is naturally going to be some reporting bias, although we'll see other ones, and presumably you think there'd be more of a bias to over-report in the positive direction, like you are looking for a relationship. Are these supposed to skew? Like this is a very three-fourths not. By extension, if you are looking, that does put you in a unique the French issue, but then it is a smaller pool. But again, if they're not looking, they're already not in the pool. So, and the overall, the broader arc of what his point is, from my read of it, and I haven't read all of his pieces recently, but the general takeaway is that you should be making effort, is his broad point. And the general point you also take away is that the average schmuck is very much not putting in effort. So presumably, if you are putting in effort, then that naturally differentiates you and helps you move to the right of the distribution. Although I suppose then you can have a conversation about how much of a handicap and how far to the left of the distribution you're starting off from. Although I do suppose, but again, the broad take was that you should have agency and improve your lot is the point. So single men, every statistic about Gen Z is roughly the same of whatever it was in the past, declining. Seems consistent, except for percent of young males who are virgins. I suppose that one inches up words, uh, unfortunately. But what you gonna do? What's I guess on that point, you know, it probably is funny to see like where you would fall into distribution. I do suppose when people talk about a power law, you can identify that evidently. I suppose I am not doing anything to disprove this or any of these statistics conceptually, regrettably. First dates implies that less than 20% go on multiple dates in a year. Uh, again, conceptually right, it doesn't take a lot of responses to have a statistically significant sample. I certainly imagine much more than 20% of people live in an urban env- environment. Again, so their point is, I suppose you can look at this article and interpret it different ways. One of which is it's comforting in that you're not abnormal or out of line with the average experience. At the same time, I'm sure if you're some schmuck projecting social security inflows, maybe you have a different view. I suppose this is a point of the jump from 0 to 1, but then the massive decline. I do suppose it is fun that just go on 1 and you call it for a year until Thanksgiving, and then you reset. Although then this point that if you get past the threshold, um, you're likely to be in a relationship. Conceptually, I mean, that's the same thing as having a podcast, having a blog, or having anything that requires effort. If you get past the threshold, that shows that you are making effort, and by definition, that puts you in a different ballpark. I just suppose the wrinkle of dating is that it is a two-way street, and you can't work harder and guarantee a certain outcome. I guess what that then is like instead of you flipping a coin and need to hit tails, it's you and somebody else both need to flip and hit tails. Presumably, if you're going on multiple dates, you're not doing a 50-50, but your 50-50 moves to a 50-60 to a or a 70-30 down the road. But again, there is. I just suppose another big point is that there is friction, and that is why it takes effort, and certainly that is an obstacle. And the other nice thing he does like he is willing to like he's not politically correct in that he will make observations or certain uh, he'll lean into certain tropes. And so I think most people think about those tropes or are aware of them, such as the woman going on dates constantly with an endless string of losers, such as a bunch of goobers. Although I suppose to this point that might not be the case. Where if you are going on endless uh, string of losers on dates, then maybe again to his point, maybe you should try something new, try a different tact. This one's interesting because imagine like where's work? Like, that's probably higher than you expect nowadays, but you can imagine in the past was much higher. Um, Family being a tool, social media being that high probably implies that there's some utility to just cold DMing, dating through a friend. I just was naturally like some of these are more high trust, and the same you get a referral, which makes you more likely to do something through a friend. Like the joke is if a friend tries to set you up with somebody, it means A, they're willing to stake their reputation on you to someone they know. B, they want you to be happy. And then C, they're thinking about you having sex with that person. And if you combine all three, that is probably a good friend. And then secondly, there is again that social proof. Whereas a dating app, you don't have social proof. Social media, not to a tangible degree, you might have like a follower count that might imply some social proof, not directly. Same with like a bar, it's not how many dating sites. Again, just it's just power laws all the way. Polyamory, very always fun to hear the stories of people who. I just suppose every polyamorous relationship is different, but seems is yeah, it seems very very complex. This takeaway: people who are single have opted out or very much not trying. I just was it was a bit of a self fulfilling prophecy because if you are trying and it doesn't, the same way you can be from being counted unemployment statistics, you give up, and so you don't get counted in unemployment statistics. Can presumably have the same dynamic, like not literally in like the survey form, but philosophically. Calhoun's rats. I'm pretty sure that's a study of too much food. But again, right, like the entire point of that is that you lose agency, and so if the point is that you can just reclaim agency, then it seems to work out. I just suppose it doesn't because it'd be easier that way, and so therefore the fact that it's not happening that way implies that it's not. But so it is nice to see that guys have always had it tough, but it's still a majority, right? Uh, Men report being single more. It'd be hilarious if this was all a derivative of age gap discourse and it just filtered down. That would be. But again, this does make sense because it's not like the male percentage has spiked. Maybe. No, well, again, I don't think this is the most coherent video, but again, I encourage you to look at the underlying article. Same point. Um, the restaurant point is, I just suppose it is a still accepted point. Like work going down makes sense. School, college going down that much, that's tougher. You wouldn't think as much. Uh, you can make an argument against restrictive harassment laws. It's only on the margins, or it's only like the broader. You can certainly make an argument that well, it all comes back to the HR joke, right? If it's flirting versus harassment and whatnot, but conceptually, you could be surprised that online's not higher, just given how dominant you think it'd be, but it's not. Like, again, it is interesting that bar still holds up that well. And again, his point is that different norms that are for the better aren't meaningfully to or aren't to blame. Which again is always nice when you can't rely on an excuse for your own inabilities. This is a good point he makes. Repeat interactions, areas they don't have repeat interactions, and therefore the social penalty is much lower. And therefore it's like a call option where, if it goes wrong, you just never see the person again. You'll lose your premium of your time. That's asymmetric as it gets, right? Uh, and it is not in some of that context, like through friends, it's not asymmetric because presumably a friend will still know the other person. At work, it's certainly not. School, college, it's not. Family, it's not. Online, yes, and certainly you can probably make some argument for that being a very implicit point. attractiveness. I do suppose he wrote this before looks maxing and some of that. Otherwise, with looks maxing is just much younger in general. Lookism, yes. Lookism, my favorite ism. This is great. Yeah, yeah. Certainly, the how quickly personalities change is incredible. Kaplan's wrong thing. Attention is primary impact of attractiveness. Attractiveness has bigger advantages. Presumably, well, certainly is true. A certain one disclaimer is that the writer is V. He is married. I do suppose the point is if this ex Jane Street effective altruist has gotten married, then what excuse did the rest of us have? And to that point, well, he worked at Jane Street, so maybe that is a is a cap in your hat. Men more likely than women to accept an outright proposition from a stranger. So that's one argument you can make why, well, certainly dating is asymmetric between men and women, probably, you can say. But again, where it's just like the mongerism, just invert, or, not mongerism, not inverting, but just do what others don't, and then you're in a less competitive pool. And certainly flipping who's the proactive one is certainly an advantage for probably the women's side of the ledger. People tend to say yes. Again, it's always, I guess it was everything's a normal distribution. Ask out a lot of people. Is this a video? Incredible. Honestly, in the grand scheme of things, I think most guys, 19%. That's pretty good. Even just for 9%, it's pretty good. Dating is a funnel. That's a great way to put it. It's all about throughput, maximizing your working inventory. Focus efforts on dating apps. Makes sense. The visual aspect is a penalty, probably for most. Improve your dating photos. Kind of need a female to help you with that, probably. So you're kind of stuck. You could argue. Probably not. I think it's one of these articles. He makes the point that at some point it makes sense to actually like pay for dating things, like pay for super likes and roses and stuff, because it like what's the upside from being in a relationship versus not, and the math actually working out. I'm personally not convinced by that out of principle. You should do it with elbow grease and charm. But to his point about paying, you can make this similar point about other inputs. Playing the numbers game, of course, means being rejected a lot. I suppose if apply for jobs, the same logic. So why not do the same logic for something that's much higher upside in presumably more fulfilling ways? It is annoying to get rejected, but you do pay a price for doing nothing at all. Maybe a girlfriend, maybe make a woman upset, maybe be a loner loser. Your choice. Again, asymmetry. It's probably a big point. This is how asymmetric it is. Basics of flirting. Yeah, just basics of flirting. Ambiguity is the fun part because when it's ambiguous, it's just you can yeah, it's fun. It's fun to think about scenarios. Again, apologies for audio if it's very light. Again, it's incredible how this complete nerd from Jane Street managed so many situations pretty well. Again, so like certainly for myself, it's like what are we doing here? What am I doing here? When this Jane Street schmuck is yeah, but good for him, because all of his stuff is free. So respect to be. The single because dating apps suck. Again, selection bias stuff. These charts are incredible. Certainly the numbers are incredible because you think about just population of people roughly your age in your area. Like some of these numbers, you're hitting a certain percent of the market. Of course, you know, there's like some you're not optimizing things in the right way. Tinder as a Match Group shareholder, I find it skeptical when they say they want to pivot Tinder to be less Tinder. And certainly we have Hinge. Um, yeah, I just was like, if if users have self-selected for a while, which is why you need to make the marketing push, then why would this marketing push be helpful? But again, you need to get the Tinder payers up because I think for like basically 4 quarters, Tinder pairs have been going down. AI companionship, I find it completely boring and just I can't imagine what. Although I suppose as a guy, it's a bit different, where it's more visual to textual, which is like the logic between other things. But yeah, but some of the stories, I don't know if the new ChatGPT, it's again normal distribution, and with that, there's going to be tails. Oh, I suppose this one's not a companionship thing, but a matchmaking service. Again, it is always fun. I think, would you spend 100K uh, to get matched with the right person? Presumably, like the NPV of that is quite positive, especially when you only need to be right once. But again, it is I think just the same way some people just can't like from a biological chemistry perspective just can't discount cash flows and time value. To the same degree, I think it's for anybody like an outflow of that magnitude. Again, it's unclear payback, even if it's implicitly evident. Skip this stuff. Don't want to go on too long. Dating is harder. Well, it's good to know for 63-year-olds. It's harder. I suppose for them it's always been. It's always been that way. Sex recession. Interesting that it went out of whack the other way. He did make a Date Me Doc. Martin Shkreli had a Date Me Doc, and Google took it down. Again, you could think of a Date Me Doc as cringe, but again, the entire point is that in dating, like you just need a success rate of one person conceptually, and anything you can do to help show effort and filter. Certainly, if you're a girl, I'd imagine Although then again, you're gonna get be inundated anyway. So I suppose for guys, you need to attract inbound, or suppose it's more useful for guys, as which makes sense. Dating market is not equilibrium. Women care more about is hypergamy the word? Um, I do suppose conceptually, demands are relative. So as they make more educated, the average schmuck looks worse. I do suppose if you're a guy though, if you're on the right side of the distribution, it's not a bad setup. Guys who complain never get dates, never make a move. Whereas the guys who don't complain made moves and got dates, yes. Selection bias. It's always good when it works your direction. Too long. Filter height cutoff. I'm not sure how much because I'm fairly certain in some apps you need to pay to be able to filter, and just given the fact that earnings aren't tremendously high, I can't imagine that many people or the subscriber base is not overwhelming. So I suppose you still filter manually, and at that point, it seems a bit more effort. 6 foot cutoff is foolish because it's so popular. Therefore, should move down market. Plus the honesty, like from a game theory perspective, yes. In practice, uh, it's kind of marginal in it at that point. And again, there's like some like frankly like personality input you could back into. Man filter by height. Again, if you pay for it, I suppose you could. I don't do suppose it's. I have to imagine it's marginal for filter. Uh, it is fun to think about. The same way, like an economic model puts everything into a discrete input that you can model differently. You can have certainly dating to some discrete model and see what comes out. Dating. I ignore what Ayla says because I just like it's interesting stuff, but I don't really. After ever seeing her version of that flowchart, is incredible. Not the most interested. Most of mine are terrible. Suppose that's why the bear joke. Cold start problem. It's cringy to just use that venture term. Polyamorous, we'll skip that because I don't think there's a lot to say because I think it certainly is not not relevant. Flipping a coin is nice to be able to force yourself to know what you prefer. Um, have more friends, widen the network. Makes sense. Be more attractive. Yes. I suppose the looks maxing community. Again, the the Gen Z looks maxing editors are on something. Um, make a plan, get practice, be deliberate, be okay with rejection, makes sense. Have a date me doc. Again, this use distribution. That's certainly like a Twitter bias. We can stick in your profile on Twitter. But again, should Twitter be your top of funnel? I don't imagine why it should. Yeah, but yeah, mixing things up shouldn't be one dimensional. But I do think, as one of these articles, he makes a point that you should have a top of funnel. And certainly, dating apps aren't great, but they can be passive and hopefully lead to some inbound. The comments, don't feel like looking through all of them. But again, like this post got a lot of likes and engagement. Again, I think it is nice for someone to, I wouldn't call this first principles thinking, but to certainly think about this stuff in a certain way, in a more structured way, is nice. So that was it. It'll be linked. I think this is different than the usual talking stuff, but I figured why not? It's been a while. I'll probably have a listen to Churdley's videos in the background type of stream later this weekend. But it will be linked in the description.